And welcome back to Shaper Sessions. We're going to focus on Google SketchUp, what it's good at, how it works in combination with Origin, and to lead us through that conversation today, I am joined by my friend and colleague, Sean Kirsch.
Hello everyone and welcome back. I am excited to be here as well. We got a fun one and we're going to get right into it. So for those of you who are just getting started with Origin, one of the first questions we get from a lot of people is, how do I get my designs into Origin so I can build the things that I see Shaper building, the videos, all the content that we're putting out? So, there's a lot of answers to that. Today we're going to focus in on one design software, Sketchup. This is a very simple, easy to use system that a lot of woodworkers happen to know already because they're using it to kind of build their ideas out. But we're going to talk a little bit about how we use that with a lot of woodworkers happen to know already because they're I'm getting a little audio back on my ear. Okay, so anyways, we're going to talk about all of the things that are SketchUp and Origin related, and let's jump into it. So maybe we can come to my screen here, Goose. All right, so this is the SketchUp website. You can see there's a lot of info about how it works. If you're not familiar, it's really a pretty decent system for someone who's new to 3D visualization and CAD. If you're not super versed in Fusion or Rhino or these other more powerful systems, SketchUp is an option for you. It's not as powerful as those, and we'll get into some details later about why you might prefer Fusion or SolidWorks, maybe even depending on where you're at in that level. But SketchUp is a really nice kind of low entry way to get into 3D systems, and we're going to go through kind of all of that and how it works. So this is SketchUp. You can get on the website. They do have now some new interesting stuff. So if you look at their products, they actually have a couple different systems. One is a web system, and we're not going to be going over that today. We're going to go over the desktop app. You'll see here they have a 30-day trial of the desktop app. And if you are just looking at this web-only thing, I haven't really found it to be that useful. So we're going to skip the web side of things, and we're just going to stick to the desktop. Now, just get it out of the way up front. The newest version, which is 2021, which is what I'll be showing today, is $250 a year. And if you're looking for a free version, you have to go way back. So they have a version in 2017, which is still free for personal use. You can go check that out on their website. A little hard to find, but you can find it on their downloads page. Okay, now jumping over to SketchUp, we're going to quickly jump into some really basic stuff here. What is SketchUp good at? What is it not? So what I found, and this is maybe also a good thing to start out with, is I'm not a professional user of SketchUp. I just started learning a couple weeks ago to really start understanding how it works. There's a lot of people who've been using it a lot longer than I have. So I'm going to try to give you an intro. I would suggest you go look at the app. I'm going to show some of that today, but there's much better people out there. I'm going to list some of those people later on in the series. But really, when I think about what SketchUp's good for, especially with Origin, is thinking through prototypes very quickly. So let's say we're working on a garden bench. This is one of the things I've been kind of designing at home for a friend, and I'm thinking through some really rough ideas of what kind of bench are we looking at, what should it look like, should I go for a more angled look, a softer look, those type of things. I find that in programs like Fusion, even more parametric modeling things where you're kind of defining everything and then building out, that it's much easier to do in SketchUp just to think through a rough idea, to not worry about how I built it. I'm just really trying to think through ideas here. Now, the tricky part is when we want to convert that into something Origin can take and really turn into something useful like you would with all these other programs. So, there's kind of this balance of like, are you looking for prototyping and ideation, or are you looking for defining things in a mathematical world that then can be manipulated later? And I think that they actually both have their space. I'm finding that I use SketchUp more for a design tool where I'm thinking through the process and trying to figure out exactly what I want. And then once I figure out and lock in on that design, I'll then go to a more advanced thing that will give me a lot more functionality within the Origin world.
That's kind of the best part about it, is it's approachable compared to the rest of the the big parametric 3D softwares, it's far more approachable, and you get a wider range of people that will use it. Everyone from furniture makers to architects, just to get like a quick idea out there that they can then file into its final shape.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think that there's a lot of people in the woodworking world who do know SketchUp already, and they're saying, how do I take advantage of this origin? We're going to go over that pretty shortly. So, okay, next thing to know really in a high level is, we do have a way to get these files out of Origin very quickly, or out of SketchUp into Origin pretty quickly, and we're going to walk through that now. There's actually really two main ways. There's one extension called Face SVG, which is the one we're going to focus on today, and there's another extension called Faber, and you can look up those both online and kind of see which one makes sense for you. Face SVG is developed by a person that's part of the Shaper community. It was developed a few years ago when there was not really a way to get files out of SketchUp. Marvin, thank you for that. It's been awesome, and I think a lot of people are using it. And then there's another one, Faber, which is a paid subscription-based exporter. It has some more powerful features as well. You're just going to have to decide and look both of those up to see which one suits your purposes better. But today we're going to go over Face SVG. So with that said, I think, let's go ahead and hop into something really basic in getting something useful out of here. So when we talk about Face SVG, the first thing we obviously have to do is install it. So if we go to the Shaper support page and type in SketchUp, you'll see we already have a whole lot of information about how to get this plugin, how to install it. It's quite easy. In the newer versions of SketchUp, you can actually just install it straight from the system. So I'll quickly show you that. And if we go up to Window and Extension Warehouse, we can then search for Face SVG, and boom, here it is. So here you can see everything about it. There's a video, how it works, all the info you need, and then you can click install here, and that will install it directly into your system. I've already installed it, so we're not going to go through that, but pretty painless. If you don't have the new SketchUp, you're going to have to actually do a little bit more of a process, but we have that on the support page, and it's quite easy. You just download it from a web page, and then in the extension manager, which is under the window extension manager, you will install this extension and select the file, and you can see here now Face SVG export by Marvin Greenberg is enabled. And that allows you to turn it on and off, etc. Okay, so now we have this plugin. So how does it work? Okay, quickly I want to explain one thing, because I come from a history of visual effects and video games, and I want to talk about pipelines, and that's how do you get an idea from your head out into the final thing. So in the case of Origin, that is, how do I get this bench from my head into the real world? Now, a couple of things that we have to figure out is the entire pipeline through that. So all the software or whatever we're going to use to get that file out. So I like to call this is one of the old methods my old professor used to call the box method, and it's about getting a simple box from your head into the real world. So we're going to come here into SketchUp, and I'm going to just start by explaining a little bit of the UI, but there's a bunch of tools up here. You don't need to know a lot about it, most of them. We're going to get into that later, but for now, all we need to know is this tool. Okay, this is going to allow us to draw some stuff in the world really easily, and we're going to start with a small box. So you can see here when I kind of move the mouse around, it kind of just snaps to all the points, and I really like this feature. But I'm just going to click once, and SketchUp's got this nice thing where you kind of just click once, you move the mouse, and then when you click again, it automatically does whatever you've told it to. So in this case, I want a 1-inch box, and we're going to make sure we get a 1-inch box into SketchUp from my brain out into Origin and make sure everything's to scale, because until we do that, doing all the extra stuff is just going to create more problems. So let's start simple. So I'm just holding shift as I drag down this green, and you can see it's kind of locking to that. And you can look in the bottom right and see the distance here. So I can just move it until I see 1 inch, or if I just hold that, I can type in 1 on the keyboard, hit enter, and now I have a 1-inch line here. Okay, now if I hold this, I'm just going to rotate around using the middle mouse button, and all I have to do is start dragging this way, and you'll see how it's already, you see how the line's turning red when I'm here, and this is kind of a loose free line, But if I move it kind of where 90 degrees might be, it holds red. And if I just hold down shift, I can now go in that same axis. So now I know I'm 90 degrees from that piece. Do the same thing. I'm just going to click 1, enter. That draws the second one. So now we have this half of a square. I'm going to do the same thing. Hold down the shift, type in 1, and I'll just finish it by clicking this. And you'll notice now we have a solid shape here. Okay, so now we have our 1 inch by 1 inch box. If I hit spacebar, I can then go into select mode. This will allow me to select the face. Now, there's one very important thing to learn about face SVG, which is we actually can't export the file if it's on the face of 0 right here. So we're just going to move it up just a tiny bit. So I'm going to select it all by dragging, and I'll just select a point after I hit the move. So I'm just going to click this move button here. I'm just going to click on the corner and kind of lift it up just a tiny bit. Now you can see when I rotate, it's not at 0 anymore. It's actually just a little bit up. Now we're done modeling with our little box, our square, and all we want to do is hit spacebar to get back to selection. I'm going to select that shape, right click, and this is where I get to the plugin here. So you just right click on the shape and highlight over face SVGs. Now the settings by default are fine, but there's some extra things in here where you can define a couple things that are quite useful for certain things, but we're just going to ignore that for now. We don't really need it. So we're going to go back down to this, right clicking, and we're going to see the 3 options: settings, layout, and reset. And reset just kind of resets your whole workspace that has all these files in it. We don't need that right now. We're already clear. So I want to click layout SVG profile, and you'll see it's now created a black box that's duplicate of this. Now if I click that, you'll notice it turns blue on the edge. It might be a little hard to see that, but when I select these, they're actually turning blue a little bit. And this is the exported file. And in order to get this into Origin, one more step, I right click, go down to face SVG again, and now instead of exporting, I write SVG profile. Okay, so I'm just going to pick a name for it. I'm going to say 1 by 1 inch square SVG. We should probably make it version 01 just in case it's not correct, or 02 because I already have 01. So there we go. We've now saved this box out of there, and I'm going to go back to Shaper Hub, where I can now upload that file, and I'm going to send it over to Jake, and he's going to show you a couple little tricks real quick on Tool. Oh, well, I need to delete that one. Let's do the second one, not the first one. There we go. Okay, so now it's uploaded. Great. So Jake, I uploaded this to Shaper Hub. That tool's already connected. So walk us through the next step, which is pretty key here.
Just going to do a little bit of a sanity check. So I'm signed into his Shaper Hub. Hop into Design, Import, and there it is, 1 by 1 inch square version 2. And really, all I want to do is just look at it, make sure it looks indeed like a square, and then check the scale, because we were going for that exact 1 inch by 1 inch. So simply check the scale. I hit the scale button up top, and it is in fact 1 inch by 1 inch.
Now what you'll find is you'll do this in certain programs, and it might not be 1 by 1. It might be 0.7 or 1.2 or 10 or 20. You never know. You know, this is kind of part of the SVG stuff that most of the programs we use work well, but I have seen trouble with certain CAD programs where the scale's just all over the place. So it's pretty important to take this type of approach and really see, okay, I can export from my mind a 1 inch box and put it into Origin, and I know it's going to be a 1 inch. And that's kind of the baseline starting point. So now we have the box method. We know how to export files from face SVG into Origin. Now, Jake, I want you to go back over there. Now, let's go ahead and place it in the world, because I think you know, we might need to look at one other option. So when we go to cut mode here, in certain cases, the outline is already figured out. But in other cases, it might not be. And this is, you know, one of the things with face SVG is sometimes it exports them the correct way, especially with more simple things like this. Other times you might get an online cut or a pocket cut or an inline. You know, with Origin, you can always change that right on Tool. no problem. But if you are going to actually cut this, 10 times, you don't want to change it every time you use the tool. You're going to want to set it up while you're doing that. So we'll show that in just a second. We're going to take a kind of a detour between uploading the Shaper Hub and coming out of SketchUp, where we modify that in Illustrator or some other 2D vector program that can help us out. So okay, so that's the first little thing. We got through that. Now, the next step we want to really go through is what I think is really cool is SketchUp kind of has this whole model library. So I'm going to show you quickly how you can just kind of find something that might work for whatever you're looking for. So if you go to Window and 3D Warehouse, it'll pop up a new window. This will allow you to search for whatever you want. So maybe since we're looking for a bench, let's go ahead and check that out. So I search for bench. I can scroll through these images. There's going to be all sorts of different results. It looks like there's like 1,000 results found for a bench. So this is kind of a cool place to start looking for ideas, and even what I'm going to show you now is how to take kind of a found model like this and export it out. So if you already have SketchUp models, if you like one of these and you want to build it, we could just export that directly in. So what's cool about this also is you can kind of just select the file and download it straight on your computer, and then it'll ask you, hey, do you want to load this directly into your SketchUp model? And if you hit OK, it'll download, and now you can see that model is like instantly getting placed in our world. So boom, now we have a model in real world that's something we can actually export to Origin right now. So I'm not going to export this one. I actually have another one already saved that I thought would be a good one to go through.
It's a shame that arm detail is really cool.
Well, we could try. Hey Jake, I'm willing to try if you are.
Let's do this front one because it seems more like a solid material bench.
Yeah, I saw this one and I was looking and I said, you know what, it's got some nice curves that Origin could handle quite well. The stretchers are another element that we could do. The back, but I want to kind of focus on this front piece here. So we're just going to export it just like we did. So I'm going to double click the model, and that's going to open this up. And I'm kind of just clicking until I get this face selected here. And you're going to have to click through a couple times depending on how that person set up the model, and we'll go over that shortly. But I now have that selected. You can kind of see if I zoom in, this face has got some blue dots on it. That face does not. If I just right click this and face SVG and lay it out, you'll see, boom, now we have that file exported. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this one. Not copy, I'm going to save it out. And
remember to raise it.
Oh, yeah. No, you only have to, so that's a good one, Jake. You only have to raise the model, not the export. So this is actually a copy, basically, of this. So this system that Marvin wrote basically takes this face, does some smart math on it, flips it so it's always face down here. So let me just show you another one. If I take another thing like this, like let's just pick this little stretcher here and export this, or lay out that. Now you'll see, so sometimes you're going to get the wrong face. So that's actually the incorrect face. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Okay. And then you have to just make sure you're selected on the right part. And now we have that. So sometimes it's pretty tricky, and you'll notice you just have to kind of keep playing with it. But I found it works quite well most of the time. There we go. So now we have that piece as well. So it's going to lay out these all in kind of a grid, and then you can export them all together, or you can export them separately. I found either way, it just kind of depends what you like better. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this one. Oh, deleted just the lines. And boom. Okay, so now we have just this file. So I'm going to right click this one and write that file out. And it doesn't matter what you do, this is kind of exactly how it's going to work every time. So I'm just going to call this one front leg version 01. Okay, cool. So now we have that saved. I go back to Shaper Hub and I upload these files here. Square. Oh, yeah. Here we go. Okay, cool. All right, so Jake, now let's go over to Tool and I'm thinking, this is a great, solid body bench. If we were going to build this in real life, we would actually need to cut out some MDF templates, maybe a 1/4 inch, so we can double side tape those to some bigger stock, do our traditional woodworking approach. But Origin really comes in to save the day when it comes to, making these files quick and easy, where, we all know it can take quite a long time to get, a real nice template built. And Origin just makes that process super easy. So yeah, walk us through what's going on, Jake.
So I'm just placing my file, and we might be the perfect time to talk a little bit about what SketchUp does to curves, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
So as I zoom in on our line, you can see this is the straightaway of the front leg, and we start making that top curve. It's not a smooth curve, it's a faceted curve. So it's something to consider when using SketchUp. Is anytime it does a curve or a circle or anything, it uses a number of polygon lines. So that's when actually building something and using this as a template, I'm going to cut it out of 1/8 inch MDF, and then I'm going to go to the sander and make it exactly as smooth as I want that curve to be. Same thing for a circle, and so on. But might be something to take into consideration if you want to use SketchUp for something like inlays and like things that need to match up really, really well.
Yeah, and I would even say, like, if we come over to my screen real quick, I'll just kind of quickly walk you through this. So when we're talking about this, Fusion's really great. It draws things in kind of really smart ways that Origin can take advantage of, which is, instead of creating a circle that's, made up a bunch of little lines, which is what SketchUp does here, and I'll show you by just creating a quick circle. And when you look at SketchUp, you're actually looking at, segmented rings. So you can see here I just modified how many are shown. This is not a circle. This is a bunch of little lines. And you can see here how the radius says 36. You can go all the way from 3, which is, yes. You can lower that. That's the radius, sorry. You can lower that, or you can make it bigger by hitting Option plus, and that will actually make more segments versus not. So if I delete this shape, and start another circle by clicking up here, you'll actually see when I come here and I zoom in, I can either go less segments here, and you'll see it here grow as it's, I'm exaggerating this, it's essentially a hexagon, but it just adds these points in. And now when we're talking about something like Fusion or Illustrator, you're actually getting a really, really mathematically correct circle, whereas SketchUp is always kind of approximating these circles. So depending on what you're looking for, this may be a deal breaker. And Marvin's exporter does some really smart things where even when you do this, when he writes out the SVG file, he actually converts it to the mathematical representation of a circle. But certain things like these found objects that we're talking about here, you can actually see when I go over here that even looking at this model, you can tell that this is not correct. It's going to show some faceting. Now, that's not a big deal to you. There's ways to deal with it in SketchUp, but with found models, you're kind of up to whatever they've done in that model. So we're going to go ahead and cut this out so you can kind of see just how it would work. But yeah, I'll kind of iterate over what Jake's doing so that people can actually hear and understand that may not have seen Origin yet. So before we started this, we actually cut it. We scanned that workspace in. So we just put some tape down. And then Jake just moves the Origin over the top of it, collecting all those dominoes. And that means really we're just trying to make sure that Origin can see tape while it's cutting. And if we go to the top cam real quick, Goose, you'll actually see Origin has a camera. It's pointing out the front of the system. And as long as you can see tape, you're good to go. You don't really have to worry. Now, and this is why you're cutting the entire shape. So you just kind of want to set your projects up in ways that you're always going to see tape while you're cutting. A lot of smart ways you can do that. We have a lot of people in the community who've built jigs and things that can really help with that. So it's pretty much really simple. You just move Origin around slowly and gently. and it corrects for you. So you can kind of see that circle there. As long as Jake keeps the circle on the line, Origin will do its thing and correct for you. Now, what's exciting about this for me is, building templates by hand means typically, printing out paper, aligning the paper because it's bigger than two regular sheets of paper. Then you have to cut it out. Then you have to, adhere it to a piece of wood. Then you have to go over to the bandsaw, rough it out, come back with a sander, clean that up quite a bit. Origin just really simplifies that process, and a lot of people are starting to really use this in a way that really just makes this process super simple, where if you need a template, you just bring Origin over to it. If they've already built SketchUp models to actually try to understand how they're going to build it in the first place, you can now just select faces with the Face SVG app, export directly, and a few minutes later you have a template ready to roll. Now, I'm noticing you only did one pass there, Jake, so walk us through your thought process.
I did just do one pass, yeah. First one, material is not very thick. If this was my holy grail of templates, I would be sure to make an offset, and a roughing offset, and then a finish pass, which is what I always do, but for the sake of time, we did it in one, and it came out really great, actually. So minus the facets that come built into the file, which we can effectively sand out pretty quickly with a spindle sander. Or since it's just thin MDF, just do it by hand.
Correct. And if with some of these things like SketchUp with the faceting, you may actually want to just get through it quicker and roughly clean it up later with a piece of sandpaper or something else, because you're going to have those facets anyways, and you're probably going to want to clean those up. So that is the basics of getting a file found in the warehouse, or maybe even online. There's a lot of places now that are selling SketchUp models. So if you wanted to just export that model, you could purchase from whatever creator or person, import that into SketchUp, just go through and right click and export all the things. I actually think if we pop over here, this is actually the file for the one that's beside me here. You can see I've exported everything out that I needed in this to be able to produce it. So, quickly just selecting faces, right-clicking face SVG, lay it out, and then I have all these. And now what's cool about this is when I export this, so one thing I will say, Control Z is your friend. If anything ever disappears, just hit Control Z, it'll come right back. Face SVG, write, it'll actually write this whole file, and it will be all these files. So I'll just quickly show you all the files. Okay, so I save that, and now I'm just going to use Illustrator to open that file. And what you'll notice here is I have all the files I need. Now, quickly you'll notice, something isn't right. Now, in Illustrator, there's a great shortcut, Command Y, which will actually show you, it'll hide all the line weights and everything, so you can just quickly look. Now, you'll notice there's, similar things going on here with this, which is, these are faceted. I didn't take the time to clean those up, but, I'm prototyping some ideas out. I don't really, at this point, care that much. Just trying to get ideas out in the world, see if they work, and build them quickly so that I can prototype them. So that's what it looks like in Illustrator. I could always export specific ones into their own file. One trick in Illustrator is if you just hide everything except the thing you want. Maybe I only wanted to export this. I could just hide everything, and when I save as, or Command Shift S to save as, and pick a file, as long as let's just name it something else, 03. As long as I have presentation attributes as my CSS properties, Origin will not show the other files when I import it. So that's one little trick. If you are I want to keep everything in one file, but I just want to export separate ones, I could come back, export this tenon, export the other tenon. As long as presentation attributes is on, it'll come into Origin, and you can just have all of them as individual files, which is sometimes really helpful when you're trying to nest things. Okay, so we went over that. And now I want to go quickly to a couple things. So, I told you I'm not a SketchUp Pro. There's plenty of those out there. I do want to plug 2 videos, and I think Ted will throw them in the comments. April Wilkerson has a great video on SketchUp where she walks through kind of the basics all the way to some pretty complicated stuff. And I would recommend watching those as a 2-part series. I think it's about 40 minutes. And then Chris Salomone has another video that just came out that's actually maybe even more targeted towards what we're talking about, which is woodworking people in general. And you know, that's actually not an origin focused video, so you may learn a few tricks that would help you when you're trying to do stuff more traditionally as well. I really like those 2 videos. I think they're probably worth your time. If you're wanting to get into this stuff, you are going to need to know all these buttons and figure it all out. And I don't want to take as much time today to go over that. But I will show you some of the basics, but really taking some time to learn from people who know it really well. I'm not that person. Is going to help out a lot. So let's quickly jump over to the basics. Okay. So I showed a little bit earlier. I'm just going to open up this same thing here, and I'm going to delete this. Okay. So here we are. Now, the biggest, most important thing I found is knowing this button here. All it does is reset your world. So no matter what's in there, if you get turned upside down, etc., you can hit this little magnifying glass. It'll reset you. Okay. Next up is we really don't need to know all these, just some of them. If you're using a computer with a mouse, it's going to change a little bit. If you're using it from a laptop, you're going to end up using these a lot, which are pan, which is if you click this, now you see a hand, I can just move the world around. If I do this, if I do this, that actually rotates the world around. So these 2 get really popular to be able to use without a mouse, and then this allows you to zoom in and out. Okay, so these 3 are your kind of navigation tools. Now, if we go back over to here, this is the selection tool, which allows you to click objects in the world. This is a really cool tool. This is probably the most used tool. It's just a pen tool. You can just click around and make shapes till your heart's content, and when you finish the shape, it turns a color. Now that we have a shape, I'll quickly go back to these. This moves around, right? I click this, that zooms me in and out to the shape, and then this rotates me around the shape. And if, let's say, I get turned upside down and this goes off the screen, if I just click this screen, boom, I'm back to wherever I was supposed to be. Okay, so here we are back in this world. Now, next up, I want to go over the push-pull, because this is probably the 3rd most important thing. And this object just allows you to take any shape that you've already created, click it, and then pull it up. So this is how we create 3D objects in SketchUp. You know, I can make that, and now we have a 3-dimensional object that matches this. Next up is the circle tool. So this here has a little drop down beside it, if you can see here, and clicking that allows me to do a couple different shapes: rectangles, circles, and polygons. Let's put a circle in here. Same thing. I just kind of, you know, what's cool about SketchUp, I think, too, is like if you just highlight over things, you'll see the cursor kind of change. So here I'm in space, but you'll see there's a little blue line drawing down there. If I just pick a surface here and I click, now I can change the size, and I'm just going to click again. Is too large. Okay, so this is, because I'm still working in 1-inch radius. So let's just quickly make it a little bigger so we don't have to deal with that. So I'll go back to here. You'll see down on the bottom, every time I draw something, it's going to show how long. So this is a 7.5-inch line here. This is a 4 3/16. So that's a really helpful function. And if you start dragging and then type, it'll automatically set that. So that'll set the length. So right now I'm at 5. If I type 3, it'll use that same line I was at, but set it to 3 inches. So that's a really cool way to use SketchUp, I think. And you'll notice here that was in the wrong plane. So you know, you just have to be a little careful about what planes are being selected, but overall it normally selects the right one. I'll just go back to the pen tool. You see how when I go over the edge here, it automatically selects it, and then I can select this one. Okay, now you'll notice it didn't quite connect, so something is not right there, and maybe I deleted this line. So I find sometimes if it doesn't work, you know, the best thing to do, especially if you haven't put a lot of work into it, is start over. So we're going to do that. Okay. Okay. And you see that just snapped to that line. So you got to be careful that it doesn't snap to the wrong line. I'm just going to come back here, and I'll make an obtuse shape here. And there we go. Okay, so that's just a simple shape. Hey, hit the P key or touch this to push pull, and now I can pull it up. Okay, so there's our shape. And now I can actually go back to the circle tool, click here, and drag. And now I have a circle in the shape. Now, this is where it gets cool. If I just click the shape and I hit the push pull key, now I can take that shape and I can basically remove it all the way down. So now what's cool is here. Now, you'll notice I'm kind of moving up and down here, but if I want to remove all that, I can actually drag over to here, and you can see how now it's highlighting the top or the bottom of this, and that's actually makes it so even though I'm dragging over here, it's actually referencing the bottom of this element. So I'll do that again. So if I have a circle here, and then I go to the push pull key or P, now when I open up and down, I can actually move it up if I want or move it down, but if I highlight something on the world, I could even highlight this bottom corner, and you can see how the little green there, that means I'm pushing down to that level. So it's kind of a fun way to work through things where you're thinking about what other elements in the world can I use to reference my changes here. So this is some of the basics. There's another really cool one. If you hit spacebar, that'll actually go back to the selection thing. I can actually offset things. So if I click the offset key, which is here, and select an element, now I can drag from that element or to an element, or any of these kind of things that will snap to it. Or I can just pick, I want a 1/2 inch, and I'm just going to type that in, enter, and now that's a 1/2 inch distance from this element. And that works on everything. Now, you'll notice it's actually, it still has the same problem here, so we'll have to fix that, but that's something we can deal with. And then now I can select a push-pull operation here and take that down. So this is just kind of the way of working with, with shapes, where you're not thinking about, okay, this shape is specifically this far from this and that far from that. That's parametric modeling. You can do some of that in SketchUp, but it's definitely not as good as things like CAD or Fusion. So I would say, if you're looking for more very specific things, you would probably look for a different thing like that. It can be done here, but it will kind of drive you crazy in some ways. Now, one thing to talk about quickly, I think, is how to move objects around. So we have this object. Now we may want to make another one. So if I double click, you see every time I click an object, a new thing will happen. So if I click once, a face highlights. If I double click, the face and all the selected things, or all the attached things, will highlight. And if I triple click, the whole object will get changed. So now, next operation is move. All I have to do is click the move button here. So there's 3 more buttons that we're about to go over, is move, rotate, and scale, and the first one is move. So if I click move, and I select an area on here, so let's select the 0, 0 button of this. Now, when I move this, you can see the shape moving around. So it's kind of attached when you're close to axes, and if you just hold shift, now you can see how it kind of makes it darker blue. Now I can move my mouse around wherever. It'll just go up and down that axis. It's locked on there. And I can click again to set it. So now that's lifted above it. Okay. If I want to rotate, I can click rotate. This one got me. It took me a while to figure this one out, actually, because it's a little confusing. So you have this protractor, and you select an object on the thing. So let's first select this endpoint, and now it wants me to drag an angle, and nothing's happening. I actually need to drag onto another element on the same piece. So I'm going to pick this line to this line, and now when I move the tool, it rotates like a protractor there. And I can type in 12 degrees, hit enter, and now the angle from there to there is now 12 degrees. So that's how you use the rotate tool. It's kind of cool because, I'm going to undo that. If I wanted to rotate it, I could actually select the midpoint and then select the other midpoint of the shape. And now when I rotate, you can see that it's not rotating on the edge, it's rotating on the middle of the shape. So any element that can be clicked on can be chosen as the point of reference that is rotated. So that's quite cool, and took me a while, but it's now pretty powerful. And last but not least is the scale. I can, click a point here. Let me just select this again. I hit scale, and you'll notice all these little things come up. That allows me to do all sorts of uniform scaling. I can do, shearing scaling to make it skinnier. And, we talked about how, you can do, these cool snapping things. So I'm going to click once on here, and now you'll notice it's stuck to my mouse. But if I bring my mouse over to one of these lines, it should. Nope, it doesn't. Well, it snaps to other objects, but apparently doesn't snap to the guidelines. Typically, you can use all these different types of shapes in the world to manipulate the geometry. Okay, that's enough for that. That's almost everything except for one little element here. So the last one that's really important is the tape measure tool. I find this is really the most important one. Basically, you can click any 2 points in the world, maybe here and here. I'm just going to go over here, and you can look down the bottom, and that's 9 1/8 inch. So these are really powerful to be able to measure things and just understand the dimensions that you're working with. And you say, oh, that was supposed to be 4 inches, and then you can go fix it. So this is a pretty cool tool to just check everything. And that's pretty much all the tools. There's obviously way more power ways to use them, but I don't want to get into it too far. All right, so now so what time we got? We're 40 minutes in. Jake, I wanted to, maybe quickly talk, one of the things that we had talked about is, originally I was going to build a bench. We were going to, build it out of large lumber, show some hybrid cutting techniques. Well, the idea was to build it out of dimensional lumber, and the prices are crazy these days. So we took a little different approach, and I think you can see it here. It's a much smaller bench, but it is to scale. And we're going to spend a little bit of time now talking about how to take a model that's built for real life and scale it down and build it with Origin. And this is the first one I built. You can see it's got some problems, I would say. You can see there's a mortise here that's too long. That was a change I made while I was building it. You can see it's already split here, so this is not even very well designed. I would say it needs some structural work. That was one of the things when you're working with this kind of dimensional lumber, which I was thinking is like, I want all the grain to run long ways on the bench, on the sides. Well, I didn't think about it splitting because you're only having this thing here. So we would have to build it a little bit differently. Also, my mortises were a little too tight, so I split the tops. So, one of the cool things about prototyping with Origin is saving that headache for small projects versus a bigger project where now you have a bunch of wood that you can't do anything with. This is a 4th scale model, so quarter scale, and it was pretty fun. I think it's one of those ways where you can iterate very quickly. I can go into Sketchup, make some changes, cut another piece. It only takes a couple minutes, and I can get a feel for how it's going to work. I already understand with this model that this is going to break first because there's a very short grain direction here. So this was a kind of a first try understanding it, and I wanted to go over to Jake for a minute because we built a second version today. And Jake, tell me what we got here.
All right, so we decided to make this one out of 1/2 inch ply, but it's still at a quarter scale. And it's a full Morrison tenon through tenon, which I think for the main design, or for the final design, we might decide not to use for a couple of reasons, mainly for weather and stuff like that. So we'll have a blind tenon. And couple other things, the same issue that happened on his redwood bench. I think these top sections are going to be a little weak, so maybe we need to beef this up. And you can just kind of tell by looking at it, because it is all properly scaled within itself. You can tell things may not be exactly right, but we can redesign and make a whole nother side of the leg. We can compare the two visually in space. So let's talk about what needs to get finessed. Namely, I would say, what do you think, Sean? Beef that back up a little bit.
I think that one's it was a nice sleek look, but I think it's not going to last very long.
And even if we take that design and we go slightly higher, We could then come in and hand work it into like a round knob or something.
Yep,
If we're
that would
working
be
especially
cool.
with softer woods, it'll be easy to hand shape. And then possibly having that be a continuous sweep.
Yeah, I think that could be cool. So let's make a couple changes real quick.
Let's do it.
And maybe while we're in here, we see something else. You know, one of the cool things about SketchUp is you're looking at a 3D model, you're able to rotate around, understand some things that, you know, maybe you don't see. I also find that building in the real world is more satisfying, for one. I don't really love CAD that much. But, you know, this can save you a lot of time if you're doing it here. So, all right, so how are we going to do this? So I already have the files. You'll notice, you know, it looks exactly the same as that. I actually didn't even quite do the things correctly. I kind of saved some time by not exporting the tenons, and then I just exported the shape out, and then we cut the tenon on the workstation for both of these sides. But as Jake said, you know, through tenons for an outdoor bench are probably not the greatest for, you know, multiple reasons, mainly moisture. But let's go ahead and make a couple changes here. So I'm going to go ahead and hide this one with Command E. I just select the shape and hide it. Same thing with this one. Oh, same thing. I have to double click to hide it. And same thing with this one. I'm going to hide it. Now, because I've already gotten those and I'm not going to change these profiles, like I can kind of work off of this, and as long as these two profiles don't change, I think we should be okay. Now that's one of the cool things I like about SketchUp is I'm kind of hacking away at it a little bit. I'm not redesigning it to be perfect. I'm actually going to make the changes I want to make now, go over to tool, see how they look, and then I'm going to rebuild this when we decide to make it for real. Because, you know, one thing that we talked about with parametric design is, you know, right now I've designed these to be 2 inches, I believe. Yeah. So if I use the tape measure tool, I can highlight from there to there and see that's 2 inches. You're not going to get 2 inch exactly. And with SketchUp, that's a big problem because I can't automatically size everything based on the lumber thickness. In Fusion, you can use like parameters to say, my wood thickness is this, and then if you set the model up correctly and you've taken some time to think it through, when you enter in the new number, which is 1.991, everything automatically shrinks and fits, and you don't have to think about it. In SketchUp, that's not possible as far as I'm aware, and you will be struggling a little bit. So let's go here and let's figure out what we can do. So first off, I'm going to come in here, and you know, we have a couple options. One, we can kind of just work off this face. Two is we can go back to where we were. I'm just going to keep working off this face because I think this has some valid values here. So I'm going to select this face here, and I'm going to go around and, like we said, figure out how to make this a little bigger. So I'm just going to actually select all these areas around here. I'm just shift selecting with the select tool to get the areas that I want. I want this one. Oh, I don't want the face. I just want this and this and this and this. I actually think this bottom part could change a little bit too, Jake. It was a little harsh.
I agree.
I thought.
Yeah, everything's very curved, and that feels like
feels a little too rough.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll do that, and we'll do this. One of my favorite things about being in the shop with Origin is really working through these ideas. You know, me and Jake, we've had a lot of nights, late nights in the shop, just thinking about furniture. You know, discussing politely our designs and and pushing them. So okay, so we have all these shapes. I'm gonna try this and see if we can go ahead and just create an offset here. Now you'll see what happens when I do an offset. So I took all those pieces, and now I just need to make sure I'm on the right plane. Let's do this. Move me down here. So I'm just gonna see when I move it, it just kind of automatically adjusts that offset. I'm just gonna make it a little bigger. I think, you know, I wasn't too worried about it getting bigger necessarily. The inside's not changing, just the outside. So by doing this, we can just offset it by a very specific amount. So if you had to pick kind of a radius, are you thinking a 1/4 of an inch?
Let's see.
1/8 of an inch?
For that top section?
Yeah.
At this scale?
Well, at real scale. So
At
it's
real
going to
scale.
blow up a little bit.
So that whole radius, I would say, should be more
Double,
like
you think? Probably double the edge right now, I think.
Double at least.
Yeah, okay, so let's just
If not
double
more.
it. Let's just kind of eyeball it. This is a kind of cool thing I love about Sketchup is like, I can just eyeball it. I don't need to think in numbers. I can just click there. And now we have a face that matches that element. Now, I'm going to go ahead and delete this because I want the bigger shape. I don't want to deal with that. And then the next thing we said is we wanted to curve this a little bit more, right? So one of the cool things that we haven't gone over yet is this arc tool. And it's kind of annoying, I would say, similar like I was talking about with the rotator. But what I have found is once I figured it out, it works pretty good. I like the 2-point arc a little bit easier, but I can just select an element on the face. And in this case, I'm going to maybe just pick this. And now I'm going to select another point down here. If we want it to go all the way out, Jake, we can do that. If we want it to be, a little further past where it was, we can do that. Let's see what this looks like. I'm going to pick this point here, and now I'm just going to drag it. And you can see I'm kind of just creating a profile that's smooth. Okay, it's locked right there, so it's saying that's the max it can do right now based on where they're at. I kind of like it. Let's see what it looks like. So now we have that element. Okay, so now I just need to delete these lines here that are connected. So we have one face. All right, so now we have that, and you can kind of see, oh, I deleted the wrong thing, but it's probably going to be okay because we're just going to export this face. So, even though I haven't built it correctly, I don't really care because I already have all the elements I need. Now, we said one more is this. I actually wonder if these could go in a little bit too, Jake. So let's play with this. I'm gonna take that same 2-point arc, click, and then I'm gonna pick a point. Oh, number of segments is too large for a given angle. Well, it did it anyways, apparently. So we're going to go with it. So I'm going to delete these two. And now we have a nice little arc in the bottom. And we have that, the nice curve, and the bigger one. So I'm feeling, it's a little chunky up top, I feel like.
It's a little chunky. How does SketchUp do at grabbing particular points and moving them in a general direction?
Yeah, so that's a good point. So let's see what we got. So if I click on these points, I don't really have points to manipulate. I can only manipulate lines here. So I could select this element here. But what's going to happen is when I move it, it's going to grab everything that's attached to it.
Including our mortises?
Well, it's not going to grab those. It's just going to grab this point. So I'll show you what I mean. So this is kind of a cool one. So I click those 2 points because these are what I feel is a little too chunky. And I'm going to hit the move button. And I need to select my first element based on what I'm going to reference. And what I'm going to reference is this line here on this because I want to move it down, but I kind of want it in line with this. So if I select the top here, now when I move it down, you can see how it's not quite moving correctly, right? You see how that top piece is kind of moving around incorrectly. So we can't really move it that way. But let's just try selecting this piece and then the same thing, move. I'm going to kind of drag in that same plane as this. Now that's a little bit better. That's starting to look a little bit better, I think.
Yeah.
Now you'll notice we got one little, so I just click again when I drag down here and now it's set. So now that angle's set. There's a little bit of a weirdness thing going on right here, which maybe we can try to fix. And maybe what we'll do is we'll just do another arc from here to maybe we'll redefine this arc a little bit to here, and then maybe instead of doing it like that, we'll put it like this, and then I'll just delete this part here and delete this line. Okay, got a few little stray lines we need to clean up. And all right, now I think that's a little bit better. It's kind of got a different look now.
Yeah,
it's not perfect. I think we could probably finesse it more, but for sake of people watching, let's just get it out. So I select this face, go to face SVG, layout SVG profile, and that didn't work. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to delete everything that's not that piece and see what happens. I know why it didn't work, actually. Let's see. It might actually work. With face SVG, sometimes you got to play with it. I also don't know it that well. There it goes. Hey, look at that. Okay, it worked perfectly. Now, so I'm just going to go ahead and look at it, make sure all my lines are there. Yep, we have the curve changes. Right-click, face SVG, right profile. We're going to call this one the adjusted bench, if I can type, 02. All right, so save that. I'm going to go ahead and go to Shaper Hub, upload that file again, and adjusted bench. Here we go. Boom. All right, it'll upload. Now, this is where it's tricky because we're gonna see what happens with the export because it may not be correct. So, Jake, over to you.
All right. I am now working on some 1/2" ply. Hop into my design. Import. What's going to happen? Adjusted bench, version 2. All right. First and foremost, it is true to size.
It's very large, Jake.
It's very large.
Tell me what's going on here.
Because you wanted it to be that large. That is the actual size that you intended it to be. But instead of using Sketchup to scale it, we're just going to scale it directly on Tool. So right here, top left, scale. Tap that. And that is our current scale. They are connected. The height and width are connected. We're just going to use the calculator. Times 0.25. And voila.
Nice. Okay, so in one of the things we did when I was designing this is we were assuming 2-inch thick material. We did a 1/4 scale, so we're testing in a 1/4 thickness. So we're cutting it into 1/2 inch so that everything will just work together. Yeah.
Yes. So the main point through doing all of this is just to be consistent. So when we were doing the back and the seat, the tenons, we just did the same exact point, or multiply it by 0.25 to scale it down. So as long as you're consistent, everything's going to come together. This is going to take me a moment to cut, and then we're going to replace at least one of these sides.
As long as I didn't mess anything up.
Yeah, there it is. So that's
yeah, maybe quickly just show the tenons, just what we did on Workstation. So they're just simple slot tenons cut all the way through. In the case of doing this for real, we probably were thinking we wouldn't cut all the way through on the sides, just so we have a hidden tenon. Just leave a little extra room in the mortise for the tenon, and then we're all good.
All right, I'm gonna get cutting.
Okay. Okay, so you'll see and notice here that it looks like they came in correctly. These are easy inside cuts, and Jake's gonna just kind of work through the system probably pretty quickly. If you want to drive Origin faster, you can do that. If you want to go slower and get better quality, you can do that too. It's really up to you. We're doing prototypes, so we're gonna try to get through this one quickly. Maybe we'll see how Jake decides to approach this project.
My cutter didn't like the MDF. It had a little schmutz on it, so
yeah,
now we're good to go.
That's a pretty one of the things people don't realize is when you're using Origin with bits is all the material that you're removing, the heat, the glue, if you're doing stuff like MDF, the tape, the double-sided tape, it really gums up the cutters, and once those cutters get either too hot or dulled, they don't cut really well. So you're gonna have to buy cutters when you get that. But one way you can kind of do that to make them last longer is really just clean them. I have the CMT, I think it's CMT bit cleaner, and that's actually a really great way to just clean your bits. It takes 2 seconds. I use a little wire brush, squirt some of that on there and let it go, and then really we're just the bits are going to last a lot longer. Another thing we get asked a lot about, especially for people who are new to the tool, is what speed do I drive, etc. Now, what I've found is the default auto speed, which you can get by pressing the green button on the tool, will actually tell you exactly what you need to know for 10 inches per minute. And I found that that's a pretty decent speed for plywood. But one of the key things here is like really making sure your spindle speeds are correct. So a lot of people want to go to Spindle Speed 6 and just really crank and even drive slow with Origin. And that's where you got to be careful, because if your spindle speed's too high and you're not moving through material fast enough, you're actually going to have a lot of trouble getting that bit from staying dull. So when I get people starting out, I really say, like, start with spindle speed 4 or 5. You know, once you use the tool more, you're going to start understanding the sounds that the machine's supposed to be making, the types of cuts you're supposed to be getting. Really just all these little details that really come from using the tool, and you know, you'll get better with the tool as you use it with time. And it's just one of those things that it's like any tool, right? You buy a track saw or a circular saw, and it takes a while to figure out how to do the basic cuts. And most people, as they get better with tools, they'll start pushing a little harder. That just ends up becoming like the type of thing you do. You understand the tool, its efficiency, how it works. And with Origin, it's the same thing. You're going to understand the limits you can drive it, the speeds you can drive it, how to get the type of quality you need. Jake's here working. The screen's backwards, so it's hard to read, but it looks like he's cutting 0 offset with this one. And my guess is when I exported it, I actually didn't have it quite large enough for a 1/4 inch bit. Origin was complaining, hey, I can't cut this shape with an offset. So Jake just turned it down to 0, and he's doing single passes for this. Obviously, if you want really high quality, you do want to be cutting with a roughing offset in your roughing passes, and then changing that over a finish pass when you're done. And that's a really standard way of working with this. When you're removing all of the when your bit's loaded up, 100% against material, you are going to have a more or less of a good quality cut. And so typically what we'll do is we'll do a pass where you're cutting a lot and then you're not cutting exactly through it, and then you'll do a second pass where you're cutting with only a small percentage of the bit loaded up. And depending on your quality, that's going to change. People like Sam like to cut with 0.01 offsets in wood and then go to 0 on their finishing passes. People like Jake are more about the 0.02 inch offset per pass for rough passes and then 0 for finished passes. I've even, I kind of go at a different approach sometimes, especially if I'm cutting a lot and it's taking some time, is, crank up that offset to 0.04, 0.05, drive a little faster, and then come back over with a cleanup at the end. I find that's a pretty acceptable quality for a lot of the stuff I'm doing. But it really depends what you're doing. If you're cutting a lot of stuff out like this, these are prototypes. They don't have to be perfect. We're gonna do them a little faster, and then when we get to that final one, we're gonna take our time and get a good output from that. So this is if you're new here, we really appreciate you being with us. It's fun to share these tips and tricks. I know people have been asking for SketchUp stuff for a while. None of us just really knew SketchUp. We're really big into Fusion and Illustrator and a few of the other programs, but SketchUp just wasn't one that anyone was really versed in. I spent, like I said, a couple weeks learning it, and while I'm no expert by any means, anyone can learn this. I think it's maybe one of the easier CAD programs to learn by far. And you can still get useful content out on Origin. Now, some people will be purists and say, I really want perfect representations of the corners and stuff. And what I found is, yes, that is true for a lot of projects. But, for what we're doing here, we're prototyping, we're getting our ideas out in the world, and we're figuring out what are the things that we need to do to make this thing a reality. And you're going to have to make a couple of them. You're not going to get it right on the first time. And so why spend the time on a huge size project that's going to end up being a lot more work, and you're going to find out the same problems when you can just do a smaller prototype, waste less wood, work the ideas a little bit more, and by the time you're ready to cut that expensive wood or that bigger piece, you already know what problems are going to face you. And really working in these little scale prototypes is pretty fun. I just took a kind of an online class with Laura Mays, who works at the College of the Redwoods, about scale prototypes, and her class was more about building them in the real world, with popsicle sticks and smaller pieces of wood, really doing the same stuff you would do in the wood shop, just at a smaller scale. Really can get you through some breakthroughs before you have to mill up and join a bunch of lumber to make panels or make bigger pieces, to be disappointed at the end by something that doesn't quite work. It is disappointing when you build stuff that doesn't work, and this feels a lot better when you're wrong, and you don't have to feel bad, right? I'm actually kind of looking forward to putting this other one in the fire. I find that's a very fun way to purge the problems after you've worked through a final design. So So yeah, this is a fun one for us, and we're just glad you came. If you have ideas for sessions, please put them in the chat. We're here to help, and we'll do our best to get content that everyone's looking for. So I think Jake's wrapping up here. I see. Okay, now I can kind of see here. He's doing a little negative offset. So this is a pretty cool thing, which is basically you're going to cut tenons first with Origin. Now this is a really kind of confusing because a lot of woodworking teaches you the opposite. You cut the tenons second because you can change them and fit them in the mortise, etc. But with Origin, it's a bit different because you can offset these paths to thousandths of an inch and get the perfect type of fit you're looking for. So you'll notice Jake hasn't actually removed that from the material yet. Smart man. To do his mortises second to see if they actually fit. So Jake, walk us through.
All right, so just going to get this shaper tape out of the way. And we're going to test fit those tenons. These tenons. Any fuzz left over from the upcut bit, get rid of that so it's not in your way.
And did you fully remove the exterior profile yet, or is that?
Yep.
So it's all cut.
It's all cut. It's got some double-sided tape on the backside, so it's not going to go anywhere.
Gotcha. Okay.
And
where'd you get that double-sided tape, Jake?
You can buy that double-sided tape at our store, and that is a great fit. So I'm ready. I'm going to pry this whole thing out.
Okay. Now, Jake, are you sure it's going to fit?
Yeah. Whether I can get it up, I don't know.
Yeah, and having a little pry tool like this is great for getting the double-sided tape from your backer board to the top. But Jake maybe put a little too much pressure on that.
I always do that though.
I agree. It's better to have good pressure up front, and then rather than you put something down, not quite enough pressure. Halfway through your cut, the bit moves your piece, and then you have to start over again. Yep.
Yeah, especially when we're live. The last thing I want to do.
Yeah, especially when we're live. Anything can happen, and you don't want it to. We just want it to go smoothly, and everybody have a nice little Thursday afternoon. All right, so looks like we are removing tape, and moment of truth. We'll see. I mean, we didn't really plan these changes, Jake. So
no,
if it doesn't fit,
I'm gonna give you my honest feedback, and we're gonna do it.
I already know. I mean, one problem is I scaled the whole thing, so the bottom is now going to be taller than the other one by
just
a half an inch.
Just shoot it from the right angle.
But that's okay. Yeah, we'll just take pictures from the right angle. All right, so
that looks great. I love that we made all these edits and the mortises stayed in their exact place.
Yeah, I mean that was kind of the key, right? We only changed the exterior profile, not the interior. So all those pieces stay the same, don't move. You just have to be a little careful about selection so that you don't accidentally click the wrong thing. I think I'm not sold on our new changes.
I'm not sold either.
I think I like the old one better, but
chunky.
This is what prototyping's all about.
Exactly.
Sometimes you make the right call, sometimes you don't, and just because it looks good on screen doesn't mean it looks good in the real world. So, all right, with that, I think we're already over time. We at this point would take our prototype, continue to make changes because obviously until we make a larger one, make a few more small ones, and then we'll build a large one. Maybe we'll do that at some other point. I think this was a super fun one.
Just that, as always, thank you very much for joining us. We love doing these things. So thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of the day.